Welcome to Tochi Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The sun smiled upon the town as the sounds of wedding preparations echoed from the mansion of Mama Ngozi. Adaora, glowing with anticipation, moved about with a soft grace, directing florists and dressmakers, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. It was a dream unfolding, not just hers, but her mother's too, if she had one. Mama Ngozi, though cheerful, couldn't shake off a gnawing unease buried somewhere in her chest. She told herself it was normal anxiety. After all, weddings were delicate events. Somto, on the other hand, was the perfect picture of devotion, hovering around Adaora, whispering sweet promises and softly teasing her when her veiled choices became too many. Everyone noticed the chemistry between the two. It was raw, pure, and built not on grand gestures, but on shared laughter, silent looks, and the quiet understanding of lovers who had waited long for joy. Zara, lurking in the background with a polished smile, watched the happiness blossom like a disease she intended to cure. She had volunteered to help plan the wedding, offering her contacts for decorators and photographers. Adaora, always kind, had accepted the offer with little suspicion, unaware she was inviting the devil to her doorstep. Zara recommended a makeup artist she claimed had done wonders for high-profile weddings in Abuja. No one questioned it. No one noticed the subtle glint of cold calculation in her eyes when she suggested it. She kept her bitterness well disguised, wearing politeness like perfume and dressing her malice in soft silks. Somto barely spoke to her, but she always found ways to insert herself into small moments, standing too close, brushing arms as she passed, laughing a little too hard at his jokes. Adaora, trusting as always, never suspected a thing. Mama Ngozi, seated in her compound chair with wrappers tied tightly around her, watched the interactions carefully. Her eyes were old, but not blind. Something about Zara unsettled her spirit. She didn't speak yet. Wisdom had taught her that silence was sometimes louder than accusations. She asked questions quietly. Where is the girl's mother? Why is she always here? But no one took her concerns seriously. Not even Somto, who dismissed them with a wave and a kiss on the forehead. Mama Ngozi sighed. In the market, when you see a goat licking a lion's paw, you know something is wrong. But you also know shouting too early will make you look like a fool. So she watched and prayed, telling herself that if indeed this storm came, she would not drown in it. She had raised her son to be wise, but even the wise could fall if the trap was dressed in beauty. The morning of the makeup trial arrived, and the house buzzed with anticipation. The makeup artist walked in with flair, a tall, light-skinned lady with expertly arched brows and a soft voice that lingered in the air like perfume. Her name was Mimi, and she carried her kit like a treasure chest. Adaora welcomed her warmly, complimenting her braids and modest dressing. Mimi smiled back, but her eyes flickered briefly toward Somto, calculating, interested. While Adaora was busy selecting beads with her bridesmaids, Mimi began chatting with Somto, throwing playful compliments. Your skin is so smooth, do you even need makeup? She joked, touching his face lightly. Somto laughed politely, inching away, but not rudely. He didn't think much of it. After all, she was just a hired hand. He didn't see the way she looked at him when his back was turned, the hunger, the agenda written on her painted face. Zara sat quietly in the corner of the room, pretending to scroll through her phone, but watching everything. Every look, every gesture. She had paid Mimi handsomely and given her very clear instructions. Flirt, but be subtle. Lure, but don't pounce. Create just enough tension to raise questions in Adaora's heart later. Zara's plans were woven with patience. She wasn't going to rush. No. She needed Adaora to doubt, to hesitate, to hurt. Her goal wasn't just to steal Somto. It was to break what he loved, watch it fall apart in his hands, and then pretend to be the one picking up the pieces. She had tried love before and failed. This time, she would use hate, dressed in kindness, sown with pity. The makeup artist was just the beginning. The real dagger would come when no one was watching. Mama Ngozi, noticing the quiet exchange between Somto and the artist, narrowed her eyes. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but a voice inside her whispered caution. After the artist left for the day, she asked Somto quietly, "Who brought that girl?" He shrugged and said, "Zara recommended her." Mama Ngozi's heart squeezed. Zara, again. Always Zara. She said nothing to Adaora, but mentioned it to one of the elderly women in her prayer group later that evening. A lion does not groom a goat for beauty unless it plans to feast. The woman laughed, but Mama Ngozi's laughter didn't follow. She knew what she saw. She only hoped she was wrong. The night before the wedding, tensions ran high. Somto retired early to the hotel suite reserved for him, exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed. Zara had insisted that Mimi do his grooming early in the morning, since he had no experience with formal powdering. It was just to reduce sweat, she claimed. Somto agreed absent-mindedly. But that night, after a brief meeting with his groomsmen, his drink was swapped. He didn't notice. The hotel staff was part of the setup, carefully bribed by Zara weeks ago. As the night wore on, his vision blurred. He stumbled to bed, mind spinning, unaware of the figure that slipped into his suite. Mimi, dressed modestly but strategically, entered the room softly. She found him already struggling to stay awake. "You look tired," she whispered. He tried to speak, to ask what she was doing there, but his words were fog. She laid beside him, carefully loosening his shirt, placing his hand on her waist, and crumpling the sheets just enough. Then she leaned forward and kissed him firmly just as the door burst open. Adaora stood at the threshold, frozen in place. Her wedding dress hung over her arm, untouched. Behind her were Mama Ngozi and two bridesmaids. What they saw burned itself into memory. Somto half naked on the bed, the makeup artist kissing him. Silence erupted into screams. Adaora dropped the gown. Mama Ngozi's eyes welled with disbelief. Chaos followed. Adaora ran, sobbing uncontrollably. Mama Ngozi chased after her. Zara, just outside the hallway, slipped her phone back into her bag, pretending she had just arrived. She ran into the room with a shocked expression, pretended to scold Mimi, and quickly wrapped a blanket over Somto. He didn't even know what had happened. He was barely awake. By the time the room emptied, he was asleep again. Mimi had vanished, her job done. Zara smiled softly as she turned off the lights. "And that," she whispered, "is how you steal a wedding with a smile." The wedding hall was abandoned, the chairs still dressed in white satin, and the aisle covered in wilted petals. What was meant to be a celebration of unity had crumbled into a tale of betrayal and sorrow. Adaora hadn't stopped crying since the night before. Her dress, untouched, lay across her bed like a ghost of joy that never arrived. Her friends tried to comfort her, but how do you comfort someone who had walked in on the very person she loved lying in another woman's arms on the morning of their vows? Adaora couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and refused to see Somto or hear his name. Every time she closed her eyes, the image returned. Mimi's hands on his chest, their bodies too close, his lips receiving a kiss from a stranger. And he didn't fight back. That was the wound. He didn't fight. Zara played her role beautifully. She arrived at Adaora's side with tissues, sorrowful expressions, and carefully chosen words. "I'm not saying Somto is a bad person," she began, voice low like someone genuinely concerned. "But some men, they just can't help themselves. You deserve someone who will treasure you completely. Maybe this was a sign from God." Adaora, fragile and broken, nodded weakly. Her heart was too bruised to defend Somto. Zara pretended to share her pain while feeding her quiet poison. At the same time, she approached Somto with equal subtlety. "She's devastated," she said, clasping her hands. "I tried to talk to her, but she just keeps repeating what she saw. I don't know if she'll ever believe you. Maybe give her space. Let her breathe." Somto, overwhelmed and confused, listened. But Mama Ngozi wasn't so easily fooled. Though she said little, her eyes were sharper than they'd ever been. Something didn't sit right with her. That girl, Mimi, where did she go? Why didn't anyone know her? Why was she so bold with a groom she'd just met? And why did she vanish immediately after the incident? She asked the hotel staff, but no one seemed to know who signed her in. One cleaner whispered she saw the woman leave with a bundle of cash in a small purple bag. That purple bag, Mama Ngozi remembered, had been in Zara's hand the day before. She didn't accuse, not yet. But she wrote everything in her heart. At the market that week, she sat on her wooden bench, sighing often and speaking less. Her fellow women asked if she was all right, and she simply said, "I fear the devil now, wears perfume and smiles like an angel." Mama Ngozi sat at her fruit stall with her head wrapped in a bright yellow scarf. Though she sliced pawpaw and wrapped mangoes as usual, her mind wasn't there. The betrayal of her son's happiness haunted her, but even more painful was the silence surrounding it. She had watched Adaora grow from an orphan girl into a graceful young woman, patient, kind, and full of life. That life had dimmed now, and no matter how she tried to justify the incident, her instincts shouted that something was wrong. That wasn't her son. That wasn't the Somto she raised. And that woman, that Mimi, she was a stranger who acted like she'd rehearsed every move. Mama Ngozi knew things. She'd been around long enough to know when a setup smelled too perfect. So she turned to the only source of truth she trusted, the market. The market wasn't just for buying and selling. It was where secrets were traded in whispers and truth passed around like roasted groundnuts. She approached Aya Salome, a woman who knew everything about everyone. "My sister," Mama Ngozi began as she handed her a pear. "Have you seen that girl who did the wedding makeup?" Aya Salome squinted, thinking. "Tall? Light skin? Big lashes?" she asked. "Yes," Mama Ngozi replied. "Ah, that one. I saw her once at a birthday party in Guarimpa. She's not a real makeup artist, though. I heard she does other things." The look in Mama Ngozi's eyes changed. Her back straightened, and she tightened the knot of her wrapper. "What kind of other things?" she asked. But Aya Salome only said, "The type that ends relationships." Mama Ngozi's heart began to crack open like a ripe watermelon. The pieces didn't form a full picture yet, but the outlines were becoming clearer. She didn't know why Zara would want to hurt Adaora, but she remembered how Zara had looked at Somto when they first met. She remembered how often Zara hovered around, how convenient her help had been. Still, she had no proof, only suspicions. She didn't tell Somto what she learned. He was already drowning in guilt and confusion. Adaora still refused to see him, and the heartbreak had drawn shadows under his eyes. Mama Ngozi prayed that night not for revenge, but for the truth. And while she wept silently on her mat, in her spirit she whispered, "If this is the work of the devil, let the chains break. But if it's my son, let my tears be the price for justice." It started with a message. A simple anonymous text to Adaora's phone. "Open your eyes. Somto has always had wandering hands. Don't let pity make you blind." At first, she ignored it. She was trying to move on, bury the pain, start again. But when another message came, this time with a blurry photo of Somto walking near Mimi's sweet days before the wedding, the wound reopened. Zara sent them from a burner number, carefully scheduling the texts to arrive late at night when the soul was most vulnerable. Each time Adaora cried, Zara arrived the next morning with soothing words. "I didn't want to say anything," she whispered once, "but I saw how she looked at him. Maybe they had history. I thought she was just jealous of your beauty." These whispers chipped away at Adaora's hope until it cracked completely. Meanwhile, Somto had not stopped trying. He sent messages daily, left voice notes filled with emotion, even got on his knees in front of Adaora's gate one afternoon. But she stayed behind the curtain, crying silently. She wanted to believe him. Oh, she wanted to. But how do you forget the image of your future husband in bed with another woman on the very day you were to become his wife? Mama Ngozi tried to talk to her too, visiting with fresh fruits, telling stories of misunderstandings from her own youth. Adaora listened with tears, but remained unconvinced. "It's not just what I saw," she said. "It's that he didn't fight it. He didn't even move." Mama Ngozi looked away, knowing in her heart that what the eyes see isn't always truth, but understanding that the heart doesn't know how to forget betrayal. Zara's plan was working perfectly. She controlled both sides now, playing the victim in Somto's house and the comforter in Adaora's home. She made herself indispensable, filling the spaces Somto once occupied. But her joy was incomplete. Somto remained cold. He accepted her help but never touched her hand, never looked her in the eyes. It frustrated her. She began trying more, bringing him meals, leaving notes in his drawer, even crying loudly in front of Mama Ngozi about her guilt for not doing enough to prevent what happened. Mama Ngozi just stared at her. "You cry too much for someone who isn't bleeding," she said once. But Zara only wiped her tears and smiled weakly. Her performance wasn't done. There was more to come. The final act, she believed, would seal Somto's heart forever, or destroy him completely. Zara paced the living room like a woman possessed, frustration rising in her like a boiling kettle about to scream. Everything was going according to plan. Adaora had left, the wedding was cancelled, and Somto was emotionally shattered. Yet, despite all her manipulations, he still treated her like furniture, present, useful, but devoid of affection. She had cooked for him, cleaned his wounds, comforted him, and even spent nights in the same house pretending to be the concerned companion, but not once did he touch her, not even accidentally. That void tore her apart. She began staging emotional breakdowns, crying on the kitchen floor, pretending to faint from stress. But Somto simply called the driver or fetched her water with distant politeness. To the outside world, they looked close. But inside that house, the coldness between them could freeze fire. Unable to tolerate his indifference anymore, Zara decided to turn her desperation into performance. She organized a small prayer session with one of those flamboyant city pastors and invited Somto's friends and some family members. The room was filled with shouting, oil pouring, and dramatic declarations. Zara pretended to be under spiritual attack, falling and shaking while calling Somto's name. The pastor clearly paid off, said she was spiritually tied to Somto and that his soul had chosen her, but was being blocked by ancestral forces. Mama Ngozi, watching from a corner, squinted her eyes. She had seen this kind of theater before during her market days in Onitsha. After the prayers, people clapped, but Somto looked more disturbed than convinced. He thanked the pastor quietly and left the room. Zara followed, tears still streaming. "Somto, please. I just want you to see me." He looked at her long and hard. "I do see you," he said. "That's the problem." Zara retreated into silence after that. Her desperation had crossed into humiliation, and she knew she was slipping. Adaora remained distant. The public still whispered about the scandal, and Somto had stopped showing up at work. He stayed home, locked in his studio or walking alone in the compound. Mama Ngozi saw his pain, but also saw his restraint. He didn't touch Zara, never made promises, never led her on. That only made Zara angrier. She needed something bigger, something irreversible. She remembered the reconciliation dinner Mama Ngozi had been quietly planning between Somto and Adaora. It was meant to happen in 2 weeks. A private, quiet meal to talk, to heal, to perhaps restore what was broken. Zara smiled bitterly to herself. "It will never happen," she whispered. "Not on my watch." The evening of the reconciliation dinner arrived with a sense of cautious hope. Adaora had agreed, reluctantly, after Mama Ngozi visited her for the 3rd time and shared a heartfelt story about forgiveness and the burden of carrying broken glass in one's chest. "Even if you don't go to reunite," Mama Ngozi had said, "go to release what you've been holding." Adaora wore a plain blue gown and minimal makeup. Her eyes were still heavy, but they no longer burned with fresh grief, just cold exhaustion. Somto, on the other hand, had been cleaning the garden since morning. He trimmed the hedges, lit candles, and played soft jazz. He didn't expect everything to return to normal, but he wanted to show her that his love hadn't died. It had only been wounded. Zara watched everything from the upstairs balcony with a heart that pulsed between panic and fury. She hadn't been invited, but she was still in the house. She waited until the evening was quiet, until the meal was ready, and until Somto was setting the final table napkin. Then she struck. With swift steps, she approached Somto with 2 glasses of juice, pretending to offer a toast for peace. "You need to relax," she said, smiling. "Tonight might change everything." Somto, distracted and emotional, took the glass without suspicion. 5 minutes later, his legs buckled, and he stumbled to his room. Zara followed, helped him into bed, and undressed him quickly. She slipped under the covers, ruffled the sheets, and smeared lipstick on his mouth and chest. The moment was set. Adaora stepped out of the car, guided by Mama Ngozi, who gave her space but waited nearby in case emotions overwhelmed her. She walked through the corridor with hesitation, but with the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be right again. She reached Somto's room, knocked, and when no answer came, she opened the door. Her heart didn't just shatter, it detonated. There, under the covers, lay Zara and Somto, entangled in what looked like a lover's embrace. Zara gasped, pulled the sheet over herself, and stammered, "This? I didn't mean." Adaora didn't wait for explanations. She screamed, staggered back, and collapsed against the wall. Somto stirred, waking slowly, confused and dizzy. When he saw Zara next to him and Adaora crying by the door, his body froze. What's happening?" he asked weakly. But Adaora was already gone, running out the gate into the cold night, sobbing like a woman who had died twice. The next morning, the house was silent, too silent. Somto sat on the edge of his bed, holding his head in his hands, trying to piece together fragments of memory. He remembered drinking juice. He remembered feeling dizzy. Then he woke up naked with Zara beside him and Adaora at the door. Nothing in between. He stormed out of the room and confronted Zara. "What did you do?" he roared. Zara began to cry again, clutching a towel, shaking her head. I don't know. You drank the juice. I found you dizzy. I just wanted to take care of you. We didn't plan anything. Somto. I swear." But Somto wasn't listening. The pain in his chest made breathing feel like punishment. He collapsed into a chair and muttered, "I've lost her. I've really lost her now." Outside the compound, word had already started spreading. One of the drivers had seen Adaora run out crying, and by noon, the story had changed hands at least 10 times. "She caught them together again," they said. "He's a beast," some murmured. Zara added fuel to the fire. She wept in front of Mama Ngozi, claiming to be confused about what happened. "Maybe God wanted it this way," she said. "Maybe I was always meant to be with him." Mama Ngozi didn't respond. Her eyes lingered on Zara's trembling hands and fake sobs. Deep down, something was rising in her, a knowing, a silent scream that had not yet found words. She excused herself and went back to her room, clutching her wrapper like a prayer robe. Somto's phone rang for the 100th time that day, but it wasn't Adaora. It was his best friend, Ibuka. "You need to fix this," he said. "Do a press release. Tell your side." But Somto didn't want to play media games. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted the truth, but he didn't have it. That night, he sat by the fountain, holding the necklace Adaora once gave him. His mother joined him, her steps slow, her eyes red. She sat beside him in silence. Then she said, "Sometimes love doesn't need evidence to trust, but heartbreak doesn't need proof to walk away." Somto lowered his head and whispered, "She thinks I betrayed her twice. And now I don't even have the words to fight for us." Mama Ngozi looked into the sky and said, "When lies break truth apart, only time can build a bridge. But let's pray that she doesn't drown before it's built." The silence that followed Adaora's departure was louder than any scream. Somto sat in his room, his head bowed, trying to piece together the wreckage of his life. He couldn't remember anything, only fragments of light, a strange taste in his mouth, Zara's perfume, and then waking up to Adaora's shattered face. The pain in her eyes haunted him. Mama Ngozi sat outside his door, worried, but also lost in her own confusion. How could this be? How did Zara always appear at the center of his downfall, yet always looking like the victim? Mama Ngozi began to replay every moment, every setup, and the mysterious woman at the hotel, the one who vanished the moment Adaora found them in bed. Something inside her spirit twisted in unease. It reminded her of the stories the old women at the market used to whisper. A woman who laughs too much around your home is often hiding a dagger beneath her smile. She walked to the market the next day, not to buy, but to talk. Seated under a large umbrella with her longtime friend Mama Ifioma, she spoke softly. "There's something I can't place, but I know something is wrong," she said. Mama Ifioma tilted her head, listening. That makeup artist, the one who did Adaora's face. I've seen her before. She paused. At a burial years ago. She was with one rich man's son, then disappeared after trouble broke out. The thread began to unravel. Mama Ngozi took her time, visiting old friends, walking slowly through neighborhoods, asking questions in ways that didn't seem like questions. She wasn't just a mother now, she was a quiet investigator. Every whisper she gathered pointed her to one thing. The girl was a plant. Paid. Trained. Gone. But now Zara was growing more comfortable, more confident. Mama Ngozi knew the real war was still ahead, and it wouldn't be fought with fists. It would be fought with wisdom and patience. That evening, as they all sat down to dinner, Zara acted like a dutiful soon-to-be daughter-in-law. She served food, smiled at everyone, and even touched Somto's shoulder gently. He flinched. Mama Ngozi saw it. Zara's smile didn't waver, but Mama Ngozi's eyes narrowed as she studied her every move. The girl was acting too well. There's something behind that smile, Mama Ngozi whispered to herself later that night. In her room, she prayed. She lit a candle and said to God, "Show me what I need to see before my son dies while still breathing." She knew the truth was somewhere near. It was the patience and strategy of uncovering it without destroying everything that would matter most. Somto was fragile, Adaora was gone, and this storm had only just begun. In the days that followed, the mansion was a shell of itself. Once lively with laughter and wedding preparations, now it echoed with silence and tension. Somto barely spoke. He moved like a shadow, going to work and returning home only to lock himself in his room. The garden, once Adaora's favorite place to read, became a space no one dared visit. Zara, now living in the mansion, strutted around like a queen, wearing soft satin robes and humming in the hallways, pretending not to notice the discomfort her presence caused. She often brought Somto meals he never touched and left them outside his door. She smiled at Mama Ngozi like a loving daughter would, but Mama Ngozi never smiled back. The air in the house grew thick, stale with disappointment and hidden agendas. Zara's frustration grew quietly. She couldn't understand why Somto still rejected her. She had played her cards well. Adaora was out of the picture. The public believed Somto was unfaithful. She had painted herself as the gentle victim, always there, always supportive. And yet, he didn't touch her, didn't even look at her. It was as if a part of him had died. She began to feel the pressure closing in, and with each passing day, the house that was meant to be her prize began to feel like a prison. She tried to win Mama Ngozi's affection, cooked her meals, complimented her church hats, and even joined her for morning prayers. But Mama Ngozi never let her close. She would nod politely, then excuse herself. Zara knew she had only one move left to make. She needed to force Somto to accept her. If love wouldn't work, responsibility might. Meanwhile, Mama Ngozi took walks in the evening, pretending to be clearing her head. But she was watching, observing, taking note of Zara's schedule. She noticed the girl didn't go to any hospital for checkups. No morning sickness. No swollen feet. Nothing. She asked subtly once, "How far along are you now?" Zara blinked. Just a few weeks," she said, stuttering. Mama Ngozi nodded. "You should register with a good clinic." Zara smiled. "I will soon. Just waiting for confirmation." The answer didn't sit well with Mama Ngozi. She scribbled it down in her mind. That night, she sat by her window and whispered into the breeze, "I'll wait, Zara. But you won't win. Even the moon watches at night." One bright Sunday afternoon, with a dramatic flair that seemed scripted, Zara burst into the family's living room, holding a white slip in her hand and tears in her eyes. "I didn't want to say this like this," she said, trembling, "but I'm pregnant." Everyone turned. Somto looked up from his phone, his face blank. Mama Ngozi placed her palm gently on her chest. Zara dropped the slip, positive pregnancy test. "It's Somto's child," she added, sobbing. "I wanted us to rebuild quietly, but now I have no choice." The room went quiet. Not a breath, not a murmur, just silence and her stage sobs. It was her checkmate move. A child would secure her place, whether loved or not. The family name would be tied to her forever. Somto stood up slowly. He didn't speak. His face showed no joy, no confusion, just deep, worn exhaustion. "Are you sure?" he asked. Zara nodded furiously. "We were together that night, remember?" Her voice cracked like she rehearsed. Mama Ngozi said nothing. She looked at the test, then at Zara, then at her son. She wanted to scream. Wanted to say, "She's lying. She's not even bloated." But she said nothing. She saw Somto's fingers curl into a fist and release again. She knew he felt trapped. His body stayed still, but his soul was running. Later that night, Zara called her media contact. The story broke the next day. Ex-fiancé abandons pregnant lover on wedding day. Somto's face trended online. Adaora's name was dragged into comments. Sympathy poured for Zara. "You're so strong, keep your baby safe," people wrote. Zara smiled behind her screen. The world believed her. That was all that mattered. But she didn't see Mama Ngozi staring at her from the hallway, hands folded. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The morning air had barely cleared when the first blog headline hit the internet. CEO's ex-fiancé abandons pregnant woman for church girl blazed across gossip sites, with Zara's carefully staged photos showing her holding her belly beside Somto's old mansion. She looked sorrowful in the pictures, eyes lowered, mouth trembling, like she had been wrong beyond words. By noon, the news had gone viral. Influencers debated the morality of the situation, while sympathizers flooded the comment sections blaming Somto and calling Adaora a husband snatcher. Zara pretended to be offline, but she sat in her room scrolling gleefully, screenshotting and archiving every piece of attention like a trophy. She wore a soft white gown and occasionally placed her hand on her flat stomach for effect, ensuring everyone around her noticed. Mama Ngozi saw the broadcast while preparing lunch and dropped her spoon. Something inside her soul recoiled, not from the pregnancy claim, but from the orchestrated timing. Somto, when he saw the news, felt his heart sink into a pit of confusion and helplessness. He had managed to stay composed during the sabotage and Adaora's heartbreak, but this public scandal shattered the last wall he'd put up. He stormed out of his room, ignoring Zara's attempts to speak, ignoring the cameras waiting outside their compound gate. The media had found out their address. Friends from school sent him pitying messages, while others asked him for confirmation. His business partners were worried about the brand image. Even staff whispered behind his back. He hadn't spoken to Adaora since that day. She had blocked him. Now she would see this news, and it would be another nail in the coffin. Zara walked around the house, acting like a grieving widow. Slow movements, soft sobs, pausing at windows for dramatic effect. Mama Ngozi watched her with tight lips, silently observing her every step, like a woman preparing to wage a war she wasn't allowed to declare yet. At Adaora's end, it felt like someone was slashing her open with dull blades. The day had been quiet until her phone lit up with dozens of missed calls and links from old friends and online threads. She didn't need to click all of them. The headline was enough. Her chest burned as she stared at the screen. Pregnant and betrayed, the other woman speaks out. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Her mother, who had already warned her about getting involved with wealthy families, merely glanced at her and shook her head. "Didn't I tell you? They eat people like you and throw the bones away." Adaora retreated to her room and hugged her pillow, the same one Somto once laid on when they talked about wedding colors and honeymoon destinations. Now everything seemed like a cruel joke. She wasn't just heartbroken anymore. She was humiliated, erased, and replaced. And she didn't know if she had the strength to ever believe in love again. Mama Ngozi sat under the mango tree beside her stall, peeling oranges slowly while watching the market crowd buzz. Her hands moved, but her mind was elsewhere, trapped between the heartbreak she saw in Adaora's eyes and the confusion simmering in her son's. The Zara she knew was not the Zara she now observed. This one walked around like a conqueror, claiming her place with a belly that had yet to grow and tears that came too easily. Mama Ngozi felt choked with doubt. As her fellow market women teased and commented on the scandal, she pretended to laugh along. At least she catch Pekin, one woman said. Your grandchildren dawn day come. Mama Ngozi forced a smile, but her chest felt heavy. There was no glow around Zara. No nausea, no cravings. Only silence and deception. But what worried her more was that she couldn't prove anything without destroying what little piece Somto had left. That afternoon, she paid a quiet visit to Adaora. The house was modest and silent, filled with the scent of sorrow. Adaora came out slowly, thinner than usual, eyes ringed with exhaustion. The warmth she once gave was replaced with distant politeness. I only allowed you in because of the love I have for you, Mama, she said softly. Mama Ngozi nodded, holding back tears. I know you don't believe my son, and honestly, I can't blame you. But my soul is not at peace. Adaora looked at her, pain tightening her jaw. I saw it with my own eyes, Mama. The first time, I was broken. The second time, I was destroyed. What more do you want me to feel? There was no anger in her voice, only a tired surrender. Mama Ngozi left the house with a weight so heavy, even her legs ached from holding her body up. The girl she had once envisioned as a daughter was now a shattered dream walking. That night, Mama Ngozi prayed with tears. She knelt by her bedside, clutching a wrapper, begging God for clarity. If I speak and I'm wrong, I lose them both. If I keep quiet, evil may win. What do I do, Chinique? Her voice cracked as she remembered Somto as a little boy, always truthful, always kind. Something didn't add up. She wasn't a doctor, but she was a mother, and mothers always knew. She replayed every detail. The missing makeup artist, Zara's sudden fainting spells, the untouched belly, and now the media outburst. She began writing names down, people who had worked during the wedding, hotels, caterers, decorators. She needed answers not for herself, but for the truth that kept slipping like smoke through her fingers. And, until she had them, she would wear her silence like armor and wait. It was a humid Wednesday when Mama Ngozi boarded a rickety tricycle to the other side of town, clutching a worn leather bag. Inside was a name, Kayamika. One of her market women had whispered it. That makeup artist? I think her name is Kayamika. She do runs. I don't see her before for big man parties. The address led to a low-built compound near the outskirts of town. Mama Ngozi, dressed in a plain wrapper and slippers, pretended to be a customer. Please, I'm looking for the girl who paints brides. I want her to do makeup for my niece, she lied. The landlord pointed her to room 5, a dusty corner room with a cracked door. When the door opened, it wasn't Kayamika, it was her roommate. Suspicious but polite, the girl said Kayamika had traveled. No, she no day here again. She say Lagos get better clients, she added with a shrug. Still, Mama Ngozi wasn't discouraged. She asked more questions, bought pure water for the girl, and mentioned Somto's wedding. The girl's eyes shifted slightly. Madam, USEF no say that girl no clean, she muttered under her breath. But before she could say more, her phone rang, and she excused herself. Mama Ngozi left with nothing concrete, no photo, no proof. But she felt the weight of truth hovering in the air. On her way back, she stopped by a shop to print out a blown-up image of the mystery girl captured faintly in one of the wedding hall security camera stills. It wasn't clear, but it was something. She tucked it deep into her bag and muttered, every masquerade must one day remove its mask. The market noise felt different that day. Less like business and more like destiny ticking toward a revelation. Back home, Zara greeted her cheerfully, plate of jollof rice in hand, belly still suspiciously flat. Mama, come and eat now. The baby is craving rice, she joked. Mama Ngozi smiled faintly and took the plate, saying nothing. Her eyes lingered on Zara's midsection, then wandered to the printed photo she had tucked inside her wrapper. She would wait. She had no weapon but time, and time, she believed, would uncover every secret hidden behind Zara's smile. Zara had always been confident that her lies would thrive in the shade of people's assumptions. She knew society would not question a woman who cried and claimed pregnancy, especially when her supposed baby belonged to a wealthy man. But what she didn't account for was the sharp gaze of a mother who knew what pregnancy looked like. Mama Ngozi began watching everything more closely. Weeks had passed since Zara's announcement, yet there were no signs of bloating, nausea, or fatigue. No doctor's appointments, no prenatal vitamins lying around, not even slight weight gain. Instead, Zara continued dressing in tight, fashionable clothes, sometimes even cinching her waist with belts. When Mama Ngozi casually mentioned pregnancy symptoms in a conversation, Zara nodded vaguely and quickly changed the topic. She spoke more of Somto's coldness, trying to provoke sympathy, but Mama's eyes saw past the performance. And though Mama didn't confront her directly, the suspicions were mounting like dark clouds ready to burst. Mama Ngozi's instincts as a mother were sharpened by years of loss, labor, and street wisdom. She had seen many girls in the market hide pregnancies, but she had never seen one fake it this confidently. During lunch one afternoon, she deliberately mentioned how pregnant women often felt intense cravings. She offered Zara fried plantain and fish, spicy, oily, and aromatic, foods that would usually affect a pregnant woman's stomach. Zara took a full plate and devoured it, showing no signs of nausea or discomfort. Mama Ngozi nodded slowly, saying nothing. Later that day, she walked into Zara's room without knocking and found her dancing to music, hips swaying, body as flexible as ever. No sluggishness, no signs of fatigue. She apologized and walked away, but inside her heart she whispered, "You're carrying something, Zara, but it's not a child." The evidence wasn't enough to expose her yet, but it was enough to watch her every step more carefully. Still, Mama Ngozi knew that direct confrontation might backfire. Zara had already played her game well, the public believed her, and Somto was too broken to fight. So instead of pressing, Mama decided to create space for truth to unfold on its own. She suggested Zara visit a clinic and recommended a trusted midwife nearby. Zara agreed hesitantly, claiming she would go the next week. But days passed and there was no appointment. When Mama asked again, Zara smiled and said, "Oh, the doctor traveled, but I'll reschedule." The excuse was weak. Mama smiled in return, but her heart beat harder. She knew she was onto something. The calm exterior she wore masked the storm building in her chest. Zara might have fooled the world, but not a mother whose soul had been bruised by truth and sharpened by pain. Mama Ngozi decided it was time to dig deeper. Her instincts could only take her so far. She needed proof, and to get it, she needed help. She approached a quiet, intelligent boy named Pascal, who worked at the same printing shop where she'd printed Kayamika's blurry image. Pascal was a university dropout who now worked odd jobs, but he was brilliant with tech and had helped Mama fix her phone once. She told him she needed to know who Zara was meeting in town, especially when she left the house claiming to be visiting the hospital. Pascal agreed to help discreetly. That week, he followed Zara on one of her supposed clinic visits. Instead of a hospital, she entered a bar in town, dressed in jeans and heels. Pascal waited across the road, camera in hand. An hour later, she emerged with a man in a waiter's uniform, the same man Mama had noticed briefly during the wedding chaos. They hugged like lovers, not co-conspirators. Pascal captured the moment perfectly. A candid photo of Zara holding the man's hand, her other hand nowhere near her supposedly pregnant belly. When Pascal showed the photo to Mama Ngozi that evening, her hand trembled as she held it. The pain wasn't in the betrayal. That part was expected. It was the weight of silence that crushed her. She wanted to march into the house and scream, to show Somto and end it all. But something held her back. "This girl is dangerous," she muttered. "If I attack too early, she will twist everything." She tucked the photo away and instead called a friend, an old midwife who used to work with traditional healers in town. "I need to test something," Mama said. The midwife understood immediately. "Bring me a cloth," she used to wipe her sweat. "I can do the rest." Mama left that night more determined than ever. Meanwhile, Zara continued her performance with precision. She posted throwback pregnancy photos she downloaded from the internet and told stories about imaginary cravings. Somto barely acknowledged her presence, but she pretended not to care. She focused more on media attention now, being invited to small interviews and charity events. She had even started referring to herself as the unexpected mother. But her arrogance was blinding her. She didn't realize that every step she took now left behind a trail, and someone was quietly picking up every breadcrumb. Mama Ngozi had seen too many liars wear fine clothes, too many betrayers hide behind tears. And she had learned that silence was not weakness, it was strategy. It was on a quiet Saturday morning that Somto stumbled upon something unexpected. He had gone into the guest room to look for one of his old diaries, needing an outlet for the storm brewing inside him. But in the drawer, he found a folded note tucked between unused tissues. It wasn't his handwriting. Curious, he opened it. Written in Zara's cursive, it read, "Don't forget to renew the test receipt. They might ask again. And don't meet me at the hotel in broad daylight anymore." His breath caught. Every word felt like a hammer slamming against the walls of his already crumbling mind. He sat on the bed, the note trembling in his hands. Every moment he had spent doubting himself, every time he'd been told to move on from Adaora. It all clicked. Rage, pain, and helplessness twisted together like vines in his chest. He confronted Zara that evening, tossing the note at her feet. "What is this?" he demanded. Zara stared at it, then at him, and collapsed to the floor in tears. She wailed like a woman possessed. "I don't know what that is. Someone's trying to frame me." Her voice cracked, her eyes wide with denial, but there was fear behind the performance. Somto didn't shout. He simply turned and walked away. That night, he slept in the security room. Mama Ngozi found him in the morning, curled in a chair, eyes hollow. "She's not carrying my child," he said quietly. "She's carrying lies." Mama placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then let her carry it alone," she replied. "We'll find a way." For now, they agreed to stay silent. Publicly exposing Zara, without full proof, would make it look like they were dodging responsibility. They needed something irrefutable. Zara, unaware they were both onto her, continued her charade, but her laughter had started sounding hollow. She now avoided long conversations with Mama and kept her door locked at night. But the air in the house had changed. Even the workers started keeping their distance, murmuring behind her back. One cleaner claimed she had never washed a single stained maternity outfit, while another swore Zara's trash was always full of untouched food. Mama Ngozi filed each detail in her memory. She called her midwife friend again. "Prepare your herbs. I will bring the cloth tonight." That evening, after Zara accidentally left her scarf in the living room, Mama carefully folded it, wrapped it in paper, and left for the midwife's home. "What will happen if she's lying?" she asked. The old woman smiled sadly. "Then you will know, and you will choose when to let the world see the truth." Mama nodded. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But peace would not come until the house of lies collapsed on the one who built it with stolen smiles. Zara's baby shower was nothing short of theatrical. She wore a peach gown padded at the belly, surrounded by balloons and smiling faces, mostly rented influencers and friends of convenience. The media were invited too, capturing every moment as she posed beside Somto, who stood stiff like a prisoner of circumstance. His eyes were empty, his lips barely curved. Mama Ngozi sat in the corner, wearing her wrapper and head tie like armor, lips sealed, eyes studying every move. She watched as Zara laughed and danced, lifting her arms too freely for someone in her second trimester. She ate a mountain of food and bounced from guest to guest like a butterfly in heat. Something about it stung Mama deeply. She saw the desperation behind the painted joy, the performance of a woman clinging to a lie she could no longer control. There was no glow, no connection, just manipulation dressed in lace. As the party dragged on, Mama Ngozi excused herself and walked outside, taking a moment to breathe. The compound was quiet now, the laughter inside muffled by walls. Her hand went into her bag, pulling out a folded paper, the results from the traditional test the midwife had helped her conduct. She had taken sweat from Zara's scarf, mixed it with ground roots and herbs, boiled it in oil, and watched the foam for signs. According to her friend, if Zara was truly pregnant, the mixture would bubble slowly and smell metallic. But it had exploded and reeked of burnt cotton. The verdict was clear. She had taken the result to a local lab as well, just to be sure. The paper in her hand now bore the seal. No trace of pregnancy hormone. Zara was not pregnant. She never had been. But Mama Ngozi didn't rush to confront her. She stood under the mango tree, looking up at the sky, as though waiting for God's timing. "Let the wind strip her mask," she whispered. Inside the house, Adaora was watching too, from a distance. She stood near the fence, hidden behind the fruit vendor's cart. Her eyes didn't blink. She wasn't angry anymore, just broken. Somto hadn't seen her since the last incident. When Zara had staged their naked moment and accused Somto of betrayal, Adaora had left town. But she returned, not for closure, but to see the truth with her own eyes. She watched Somto's rigid body language, how he avoided touching Zara, how his eyes searched the crowd for something, or someone. Maybe he still loved her. Maybe he was just trapped. She didn't know anymore. But what she saw today wasn't love. It was misery wrapped in fabric. She turned to leave, wiping the silent tears that slipped down her cheek. At the gate, the fruit seller held her hand and said softly, "Be patient, my dear. What's stolen can never stay hidden forever. Even a lie has a heartbeat that runs out." It was 3 days after the baby shower that the final blow quietly arrived. Mama Ngozi sat in her bedroom, reading her Bible when the midwife's text message beeped. DNA blood test confirms no match with pregnancy hormones. False claim verified. Proceed wisely. She closed her Bible, gently folded the test result, and placed it in a wooden box beside a worn-out photograph of her late husband. The war was over. She had won, not with shouting, not with threats, but with truth, patience, and prayer. She didn't need to drag Zara out in front of the media or disgrace her. Truth, she believed, was like smoke. It always found its way out. Somto would know when it was time. For now, she decided to wait. She smiled faintly, walked into the compound, and fed her goats as though nothing had changed. But in her heart, she knew the season of lies was ending. Zara, meanwhile, had started slipping. She now avoided the kitchen, afraid Mama might ask her to cook something bitter like herbs. She stayed in her room longer, snapped at the workers, and flinched whenever Somto looked at her too long. She still posted pictures, still gave interviews, but there was less joy in her laughter now. Her smile was becoming forced, strained. Every morning, she had to wear a fake belly wrap and bind it tight under her clothes. The lies were becoming exhausting, and the web she'd spun was choking her. She had tried to keep Somto by guilt, by scandal, and by playing the victim, but nothing worked. He no longer touched her, no longer asked questions. He had simply gone silent. That silence terrified her more than anger ever could. She feared what was coming, feared when the axe would fall. But she didn't stop. Pride wouldn't let her. One evening, as she walked through the hallway, she heard Mama Ngozi humming a song, slow, spiritual, heavy with meaning. The old woman sat in the living room, sipping palm wine, her eyes closed. Zara paused and asked, "Is something the matter?" Mama opened her eyes slowly and said with a smile, "No. I'm just waiting. The wind will soon blow, and we will all see the fowls behind." Zara blinked, confused, but her chest tightened. She walked away without a word. That night, she stared at herself in the mirror. The smile she had stolen, the one she used to tear two lovers apart, was fading. And soon, the price of that smile would be demanded. And she wasn't sure if she had enough left to pay. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Tochi Stories for more.